All right. Good morning, everybody. Today is Monday, March 28th. This is CAD 212. Today in class, we're going to be going over how to create curtain walls. This is in particular what we're going to be creating, type of curtain walls. Let me do this for architecture, and so these actual curtains are not showing up. Much better. So we're going to learn how to incorporate these into our building. It's basically they're walls of glass supported by mullions, a mullion grid and structure. So you can see in this one actually really nicely how thick these mullions and support walls actually are. A really good live example of that would be to go out to the Delgado campus on Louisa Street, and you can see that entire front wall is a curtain wall. So we're actually going to place this, everyone has to place a curtain wall in one specific area of your Revit drawing. You can use it in other areas as well, but specifically what we're going to be doing is adding this curtain wall into this section of the building for our staircase. So that's actually going to kind of show off our staircase from here as well. So let's actually just open a new project. Or we can just kind of play with some curtain walls, see how they work, and then incorporate them into our actual project. So in order to start your curtain wall, you're going to just start with your typical wall space. I've just drawn a simple wall here. So I'm going to go back to level 1, and I'm actually going to insert my curtain wall into this space right here. So in order to do that, I'm going to go back to wall, and I'm going to change the properties and property type. You scroll all the way down, and you'll see you have 3 different choices. There's curtain wall, exterior glazing, and storefront. The main difference between these is the functionality of it. Curtain wall would be a more a larger structural base. I don't really use exterior glazing, and storefront would be something more like if you were using this for like a strip mall. But they all pretty much perform the same function. But let's use curtain wall here. And then we're going to come back to our wall that we want to insert the curtain wall in. And notice we're going to have a starting point. You've got that little X where it's going to start. You've got your temporary dimensions set up. So we can go ahead and click there. And then I'll click and end it. And then I'm going to get this arrow. I'll just click off. And on here it says highlighted walls overlap. One of them may be ignored when Revit finds room boundaries. Use geometry to embed one wall within another. So most people just ignore that. And then we go back to something like this, and you've got your wall that looks exactly the same. So how do we fix that? Well, let's go back to level 1. We don't have to cut anything out, like it said. All we have to do is select that curtain wall again, make it active. Go back to your properties, go to edit type. And all you need to do is check this little box right here, so it automatically embedded. So if I check that box and hit OK, when I come back out, notice how the wall has changed. If I jump to 3D again, now you can actually see the curtain wall. So anytime you originally start using a curtain wall within a project, you have to go to automatically embed it and make that active. But once you do that, you're set. So here we have our curtain wall. Let's take a front view. And if I click on that and I jump to my properties, I'll take a look at the constraints. It's unconnected, set to 20 feet. These constraints are very similar to just the regular wall, so it kind of follows that. Then from here, if we want to adjust that curtain wall, we'd click on it, make it active, and we just adjust the properties. So if I want it to be 15 feet, I can set this to 15 feet. Notice how the wall fills itself back in as the curtain wall gets smaller. If I wanted it to be not flush with the bottom, I could change that as well. If I wanted that to be, oops, 1 foot off the bottom, I'll change that to 1 foot. But notice when I changed that to 1 foot, it didn't just go, it didn't just cover up the bottom part. It actually moved up a foot as well. So if you wanted this particular curtain wall to be a certain height, you want to make sure that the height is correct, because I may have to change this to 16 feet. So to make sure that the height is correct. So you need to keep that in mind as you do that. Let's just undo what I did. And notice how the whole thing shifts down. So if the height of this is correct, you want to make sure that the measurements are correct as well. So this just moved up a foot. If I want this to end at actually 15 feet, now I have to actually lower it again because it's offset 1 foot up. Unconnected height would be 14 feet. And now that brings it back down to the size that I want it to be, the location that I want it to be. So it's just something to start playing with, thinking about and playing with as you start laying in your curtain walls. As you start putting these into the space that we're going to be doing, it'll start making more sense. So right now we just have like a big pane of glass, like an aquarium. But as we noticed on these curtain walls over here, it's graded with lots of mullions. And this is where you can get some interesting design ideas. It doesn't just have to be like a row of rectangles and squares. Notice how these have these offset a little bit here, and it just gives the building a little bit of interest. So how do we do that? So let's go to our front view. We can do this in 3D. So we'll go to our architecture tab. And then if we go to our build panel and all the way to the right of the build panel, you'll notice that we have a curtain system, curtain grid, and mullions. We're actually just going to use the curtain grid for this one. So I'll just click on that, make it active. Notice here we can do segments, all segments at a time, different ways so we can create our segments. And basically what it's doing is think of it as scoring the glass where you want that that curtain wall, the curtain grid to start. So if I click on it there and I'll zoom in, notice how it just literally just kind of scores the glass. And this is making the pattern to add your mullions. So we do the curtain grid first. And you can use your temporary dimensions to make sure that these are measured out correctly. And then we can also just use one segment at a time. Wanted to do something like that. And if we turn that around the front, get something that looks like that. So you want to keep going on this because it's not finished yet. To finish it off, we actually have to use our mullions. So architecture tab, build panel, mullions tool. And when we click on that, make it active, there's different ways that we can insert lines, segments. So if I just pick on this line right here, notice how it dropped in that mullion there. You can do one at a time, but we could just do all grid lines at once. And that's really the most efficient way to do it, especially when you're putting them in initially. So there we have our curtain wall. So that's the most basic curtain wall. It's actually pretty easy to make. Actually, I think they're kind of fun because it adds a lot to your design rather easily. We'll use this definitely in the stairwell, but you can incorporate it in throughout different parts of your building. There's different ways that we can adjust parts of this curtain wall as well. And if you notice these on buildings as you're out, there's these mullions intersect one another a little bit differently from time to time. I personally prefer when the mullions don't intersect this top or bottom mullion. And once again, it depends on the business that's creating them. But if you didn't want that to intersect this bottom part, you can click on this mullion, make it active, and then just click on that mullion and notice how that's not intersecting anymore. And we can just do that with the rest of them. And it just gives a nice flush look. And once again, this is just attention to detail as you're working through your projects. A lot of this will be dictated by the company that makes your mullions. But it's good to know how to adjust those. And just for design look, I think it's nice. So I just think it's a much more finished look like this as personal preference. But then, you know, once you actually get the building into real life, it's something that nobody's really going to notice that. It's just something good to know when you're doing in class. All right, and there will be times where you're going to want to switch up these mullions. If you created a design for your client and your client didn't like it, you want to know how to adjust this. So we can do that as well. So say they did not like the way that these two mullions were placed here. What we can do is delete those. We'll delete the mullions. But it's still going to leave that curtain grid in place. It's still going to leave that scoring in place where that mullion is supposed to go. So in order to get rid of that, we're going to click on that and make it active. And notice here we have add remove segments. So that just deleted that piece. So we'll do the same with this one down here. We'll click on it, make it active, go to add remove segments. And now we have lost those pieces right there. And if you wanted to add in a couple other ones, so they wanted you to add something else in, we'll go back to curtain grid and we can just score like one section of it. Say that one here. And then one here. We can add new ones back in. And then if we wanted to create panels that were different material as opposed to glass, say if they wanted some metal panels in here or wood or whatever you wanted, some wood looking panels, they wanted to do that, we can change these from glass to a different material. This can be a little tricky sometimes because it's hard to actually get the correct panel itself. So you kind of have to just linger over one of these sections and hit the tab button until eventually it's going to highlight that section of window. Then we'll come over here into our type selector and say if we wanted to change that to brick. And then we can just swap that out for a brick section. Say if they wanted metal sections or something like that, you'd want to make a particular wall type first because you have to select that from your wall types. And then you can change that to different wall sections. So let's do that again with this piece over here. So let's just hit tab button. There it is. Come to properties. So if you did want to use like different materials like a copper or something, then you could just take the generic wall type, create that new wall, change the material to copper or whatever. You know how to create walls now. And that's a way that you can create different looks with different wall sections. And as you start thinking about it, it can make some really, really interesting designs. I've seen some really good design parts from other students and things. So it's really one of the most fun parts of the class, I think. And it really does give you a chance to think about how you want to design and bring some kind of interesting design into your building. So any questions about curtain walls before we go on? Because just the next thing I'm going to do is go into how to incorporate this into your current building. Okay, I'll go over the entire process again, just using it into our current building, and we can go from there. So, yeah. All right, let's jump back to our building in question. This is someone's project that I've been looking at, and we'll take a quick tour through that before we insert a curtain wall here. Let's jump to level 2. We've got all our rooms incorporated in here, level 3, and our office space is laid out here. One thing of note that I'd like to bring attention to on this one is sometimes when we have corridors and in dead spaces, it's probably not the best use of the space, because there's no, this is just dead space right here. If it ended in a window here, then it would be a nice view. But here, this is a lot of space that we can use to just create, more room, more functional rooms. If we wanted to add, like, close this off here, I would actually just close this off. There's a couple things you can do here. If you put doors here, you can make this a closet for this room. You could get, if this is a bathroom, this is a women's room, you can delete that and make it a larger women's room. You could split the space and make a larger men's room and a women's room as well. You could actually do the same thing over here and close this space off, since it's not ending in a window, and make a closet in this space. And then the same for this. There's no need to have this empty walkway here. So it's also a way to think about the most functional use of your space. You could do the same here. You could close this area here, do tiny closets for these two buildings, these two offices here. So think about the use of your space. This could add much more space in this location. Or you could add closets for any of these buildings. So think about the use of that dead space when you're laying out your building. I mean, there's a lot of times that we can't, we're going to need to use the hallway, but this is a lot of dead space that can be used for like other functions. So think about incorporating that into your project. And not, if it ended in a window, that would be one thing. And then you could have you could flip the door entrances. There's different things that you can do, but optimally, you want to think about the best way to use all your space and maximize that for utility as opposed to just being a walkway. So that's one critique I have on here. I think you had the same on, not so much on the second floor. See, like here, this is perfect. You could actually probably make this a little bit bigger. You've got a utility closet or something there. So that's exactly what I'm talking about. So good use of space here. And you could probably do the same with this space here. Let's kind of put another wall here, and it could be a closet for one of these offices or building or rooms or whatever. Not sure what the open space is in your next Next time you turn in your work, if you just explain to me what this open space is, that would be great. But you can just make a note of that on your Canvas notes. So yeah, little critiques there. So for this building, let's go ahead and jump into level 1. And we're going to go ahead and create our curtain wall in this wall right here and this wall right here. So let's go ahead and jump in. So first thing we're going to go to is our wall type. And we are going to go down to our curtain wall. And we'll start inserting that here. I have that same warning that I had from before, so I'm just going to click on the curtain wall, make it active, go into edit type and do automatically embed. Now that's automatically corrected our curtain wall. Let's go to 3D and see what we're looking at. And we've got something that's coming along nicely like that. A couple of adjustments we need to make. So we're going to, I can set my height on this. You can make 3 individual curtain walls, 1 for each floor. Say they were set to 10 feet. I'm not giving you any parameters except making sure that they go in this section of the building. Here, I'm just going to change this from unconnected up to level 4. And then when you connect it up to level 4, sometimes it may be a little high. Actually, let me hide this roof and see where that ends. So it's going to end flush with the top of that roof, which I don't really like the way that looks. So I'll just take this and I'll change that back to unconnected, and maybe I'll set that to 29 feet. And we have that finished area right there. At this point, I'm just going to start creating my design with my curtain grid. I'll just make a simple one for now. Then I'll go to my mullions. I'll do all at one time. It's just more efficient. And then I've got my curtain wall embedded in my building. But actually creating it is really easy. It's the fun challenge is the design challenge, how to make it interesting and incorporate that into the rest of the building, how it'll show that building off. And once we have our staircase in there, it's going to look really nice. And then you can also do it on this back wall as well. So if go ahead and continue working on your work. You should be getting to a point where most of it, as if you keep up with class, most of this stuff is complete once you finish class. This is pretty easy to do. And it just takes a little practice to fiddle with it. And the challenge really is incorporate it in there, make an interesting design, and see if you can swap out a couple of these panels with another type of building material. Any questions about curtain walls, y'all? All right, if there's no questions, please use the rest of the time to continue your work and get everything knocked out. And then I will see you all on Wednesday.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.